We all know that feeling when the world seems to be shifting beneath our feet. It is that sense of unease when the old rules no longer apply, the institutions we once trusted feel hollow, and the future looks more like a storm than a sunrise. We look for answers, but often the people in charge seem just as lost as we are. This feeling of spiritual anxiety is not unique to our modern age. In fact, it was the defining atmosphere of Japan in the early 13th century. At that time, the country was undergoing a violent and profound transformation. The old aristocratic order was crumbling, military rule was on the rise, and there was a widespread belief that humanity had entered a dark period known as the latter age of the Dharma. People truly believed that the world had become too corrupt for anyone to reach true understanding or enlightenment. It was in this climate of doubt and decline that a young man named Dogen began a journey that would change the way we think about existence itself. Dogen was born in the year 1200 into a life of immense privilege. His family was connected to the imperial court, and on paper, he had everything a young person could want. But life has a way of stripping away those comforts. By the time he was only 7 years old, both of his parents had died. There is a story that as he watched the incense smoke rise during his mother's funeral, he felt a sudden, piercing realization of how fragile life really is. He saw that everything we love eventually disappears, and that realization stayed with him like a physical weight. He did not just want to study religion out of tradition. He had a deep, personal urgency to understand why we suffer and if there is any way to find a peace that does not wither away. Driven by this need, he joined the most powerful religious center in Japan at the time, the Tendai establishment on Mount Hiei. He spent years buried in ancient scriptures and complex rituals. He was a brilliant student, but the more he learned, the more a single question began to haunt him. The teachings said that all human beings already possess Buddha nature, meaning we are already fundamentally enlightened. If that is true, Dogen wondered, then why do we have to work so hard to find it? Why do we need years of grueling practice and meditation if the prize is already inside us? He asked his teachers, but their answers felt like they were coming from a script. They relied on authority and tradition rather than genuine insight. For Dogen, this was not just a philosophical puzzle, it was a crisis of faith. He felt that the Buddhism of his time had become a performance, a series of empty gestures that did not actually touch the reality of human pain. Disillusioned and still searching for an answer that felt true, he decided to leave the safety of the establishment. He eventually realized that if he could not find the truth in Japan, he would have to find it at the source. In the year 1223, he set sail for China. It was a dangerous journey, one that many did not survive. But Dogen saw no other choice. He spent years traveling from monastery to monastery, but he found much of the same corruption and obsession with status that he had left behind in Japan. It was only when he was almost ready to give up that he met a master named Rujing. Rujing did not care about titles or complex theories. He focused on one thing, the direct experience of reality. Under Rujing's guidance, Dogen experienced a breakthrough that he described as dropping off body and mind. It was not a magical vision or a trip to another dimension. It was a total release of the ego, a letting go of the constant need to achieve something or become someone better. In that moment, his old question finally found its answer, but it was not what he expected. He realized that practice is not a tool we use to get to enlightenment. Practice is enlightenment. The act of sitting, the act of breathing, the act of being fully present in this very moment is the goal itself. There is no finish line to cross because the race and the runner are the same thing. When Dogen returned to Japan, he did not try to fight for power in the capital. Instead, he walked away from the political games and the famous temples. He eventually moved to a remote, mountainous region and founded a small community. He wanted a place where people could just sit. He called this zazen, or seated meditation. He taught his followers that when you sit, you are not trying to become a Buddha. You are simply allowing the Buddha that is already there to express itself. He insisted that nothing was lacking in the present moment, no matter how messy or difficult that moment might feel. His writings from this period, especially his massive work called the Shobogenzo, are some of the most beautiful and confusing texts in history. Dogen did not write like a typical philosopher. He used paradoxes and poetry because he felt that ordinary language was too small to capture the truth. He wrote about time as if it were a living thing, arguing that we do not move through time, but rather that we are time. He believed that every single moment, whether you are eating a bowl of rice or washing your face, is a sacred act if you do it with your whole heart. But Dogen's life was not a fairy tale of perfect peace. Even after his realization, he struggled. He dealt with chronic illness, the isolation of the mountains, and the constant frustration of trying to explain something that cannot be put into words. He was terrified that his teachings would eventually turn into another rigid institution, another hollow shell for people to hide behind. He did not want followers who just repeated his words. He wanted people who would live the truth for themselves. Dogen died in 1253 at the age of 53. At the time of his death, he was not a famous figure. He was just a monk in the mountains with a small group of dedicated students. But his influence began to grow, slowly at first, and then like a tidal wave. He offered a vision of spirituality that did not rely on promises of a better life after death or the intervention of gods. He pointed us back to the only thing we actually have: the here and now. His life tells a story of a man who refused to accept easy answers. He lived through a time of total chaos and managed to find a sense of meaning that did not depend on the world being perfect. He did not solve the problem of suffering by making it go away. He solved it by showing us how to stand right in the middle of it without losing ourselves. Meaning, for Dogen, was not something you find at the end of a long road. It is the road itself. It is found in the simple, quiet act of sitting, breathing, and being present in a world that never stops changing.